Hello everyone and welcome back to Conscious Evolution. My name is Hazel Moore, and I'm your guide, your mentor and your friend during the whole of this series. So today we're going to be talking about the cycle of addiction. Now when you signed up for this course you will have been sent or had access to a series of MP3s, meditations that be very useful for you to use from time to time. And you would have been sent various other PDFs, one of which would have been labelled The Cycle of Addiction. And that's what I'm going to start talking about today. The cycle of addiction, starting with unmet needs, going through demanding behaviour patterns, which are unsatisfying outcomes come from that, and so on. If you have that PDF in front of you while I'm chatting with you here, you can start to follow where my mind is flowing to. So many people on this planet, I would take a guess at over 90% of the people on this planet have had one form of addiction or another. From the most intense and the most excruciating and debilitating to something that could be just a bad habit. So addictions range from people who take street drugs, prescription drugs, drink alcohol to excess, to people who eat a lot of sugar, to people who are caffeine addicts, sex. Some people are addicted to sex, controlling others. Some people are addicted to relationships. There are no manner of things that we can be addicted to. And it's time now for us to take total responsibility for ourselves, for all that we've been through up until today, to own everything, every emotion and every thought that we have created. Now, most of us, as we are born onto this planet, we are not born to fully conscious parents. Those that are very few and far between. And most of us in our early childhood come across our needs not being met. There can be physical needs of not having enough food, not having enough warmth in the form of clothing, not having a clean environment to have our physical bodies in. So these would be a form of unmet needs, and they could result in someone who is fastidious about being clean, someone who is obsessed with serving up loads of food. You know, things like that are very crucial telltale signs that we have unmet needs. My own mother, for example, born before World War II, I grew up in a family environment where my mother was obsessed with feeding us, with making sure that there was plenty of food in the cupboard and on our plates. And I realised many years ago that this was because in her early childhood, food was pretty scarce. And she often would eat off of her mother's plate, sharing her mother's meal. And this created in her an unmet need of not enough. So that's just a very brief illustration of where an unmet need can start to manifest. And in turn, that unmet need eventually will create demanding, needy behaviour patterns. Now, in my own life, I was born to, obviously, mum and a dad. And my mother was often, very often, not present. Not present with me, meaning she was often preoccupied with all of her daily tasks, all the things that she had to do, and her mind was often elsewhere. And I grew up feeling unloved. I cannot remember a time when I sat on my mother's lap or she was affectionate towards me. So I grew up not experiencing a mother's love. So that was a huge unmet need in me. Thankfully, it was balanced by my having a father whose love for me overflowed. So I had the two extremes. On the one hand, I didn't know love from the female energy from my mother, and on the other hand, I had total unconditional love, the sort that swells your heart, from my father. Now, I won't go into the higher spiritual meaning of why I chose that. You know, I totally 100% know and accept that I chose that. But for the purpose of this video, we're talking about how unmet needs start this cycle of addiction, which can end up in self-harm, violence, and, you know, taking enormous amounts of drugs. So going back to our unmet needs, this is where they start. This is where they first are seeded in our energetic patterns, in our auras. So you could have parents that are violent and your unmet needs of being consoled, of being reassured, are not met. Because in the midst of the violence, the parents are oblivious to anybody else's needs and feelings. They are so self-absorbed, so much into the intensity of the violence that everything else is obscured. And let's be honest, in those moments, they are what we would call insane. So how does that affect the one who is now presenting unmet needs? Well, in the small child, the child will become needy, maybe whining a lot, constantly clinging to the parent, whether that be emotionally or physically, becoming more and more demanded as the resistant from the parent is pushing the child away, whether that is physically or emotionally. We as the child will still feel that, and we will know that, and we will start to push back, because at that moment that's all we know, because we're not fully conscious, we're in a learning process. So we've been born into this situation where our needs are not being met, resulting in demanding, needy behaviour. Now, if you've ever been in the company of someone who is needy, you will feel that they're pulling on you. They're almost demanding that you listen to them, that you give your total attention to them. And if you're unaware of what is going on, this can lead to you wanting to push them away, getting angry in retaliation to them, having knee-jerk reactions, in other words, and wanting to be angry and less than loving towards them. And these people who are needy and demanding will often talk a lot, have verbal diarrhea, needing to be heard, all manner of behaviour. And of course, this is an unsatisfying outcome for everyone involved. Now, when my daughter was 8 years old, I separated from her father. And this caused an unmet need in her to be created. In the moment that she knew and heard that I was no longer going to be living with her father, something in her was unmet. And fast forward a few months down the road from that event when I left her father, I found that she was clinging to me physically, becoming more needy and not wanting me to leave her on her own. So these were issues of abandonment, feeling lost. Yeah, great loss and abandonment were the feelings that were arising in her. And instead of owning them and facing them, she reacted to them. But of course she would, being only 8 years old. But I recognised this more and more. I was becoming consciously aware of everything in me and therefore around me. And I sat her down and spoke to her as much as I'm speaking to you now in this tone of voice, and explained to her how she was making me feel. And she understood what I was saying. I said to her, I often feel as though you're clinging to me and suffocating me, and it feels as though I want to push you away. Now, in my heart, there is no way I want to do that. I simply love you from my heart. But when I'm in my mind and you are presenting this behaviour to me, I want to push you away and get away from you. So I sat her in the chair and said to her, relax. Let's get you into your heart, because these demanding, needy behaviour patterns come from the mind, not the heart. So she relaxed into the chair and I was speaking to her, and I could see energetically that she was letting go of all of the pain that she was holding on to in her mind. And then I said to her when she was relaxed, now love me. And she did. And the love poured out of her. And I did the same back to her. And I explained to her, this is love. This is where we are going to live from as best we can from today going forward. And I said to her, I want you to tell me when I'm not coming from love, when you are not being heard, when you are feeling that I'm not loving you. And I will do the same to you. She smiled and her face lit up. Because we must remember that what we call children are wise souls. All of us are wise souls. But we're born into a small body, and it is the body that we give years to. It is the body that is 1, 2, 3 years old, 60 years old. But the soul inside the body has come for a certain experience. And a part of that, with most of us, is to take full responsibility for all of our needs. So going back to the unmet needs, you also have, as part of this course, a PDF that names many, many, many emotions. So hopefully you will look through all of those emotions and be able to name some of yours. If you can't name them, then get in touch with me, either through social media or send me an email, or we can quickly Skype, and I will help you to identify these emotions that we are calling unmet needs. It's important to name your emotions. Naming is powerful. When we name something, we identify it, we expose it, we bring the dark into the light. We bring that which we couldn't name, darkness, into the light of something we have now named and identified. So that's important that you run through that list. So many of us had feelings of abandonment, loss, guilt, blame, shame, and they are all part of our growth and understanding about ourselves. So these unmet needs create demanding behavior. A demanding behavior can be as insignificant as a child that whines. I don't say insignificant lightly because that can be very debilitating and insidious. To a demanding behaviour of someone who is violent and wants to control us to the extreme of their demands. And so that's a bully, really. And bullies are people that haven't had their needs met in the same way that a victim is someone who believes their needs haven't been met. But it all comes to an unsatisfying outcome. Nobody gets the nourishment, mentally or emotionally or physically, that they are seeking. And this in turn confuses us, causes so much frustration that, we just start to go haywire, and we start to lose it because we're getting way out of control because we're in our mind. We've come out of those feelings because we don't want to feel how we felt. Because let's face it, some of them are pretty feelings of desperation that, they're not nice feelings at all. They're scary as well. We've lost it. We lose control. But it's all because we're in the mind, which will be explained in another video. So the confusion and the frustration, when it's with us long enough, causes pain, fear, and anxiety. Dreadful, dreadful emotions being brought up in us by the thoughts centered around unmet needs and our neediness as a result of the unmet needs. So the pain, the fear, and the anxiety, I want you to know, is a product of our thoughts and our emotions, from not living from the heart. And the reason we stop living from the heart is because we don't want to feel the feelings and own them and thereby process them. So this feeling of pain, fear, and anxiety builds into anger, frustration. Now we're looking at the monster that we're building inside of us as having power over us, that is owning us, all from our thoughts. And our thoughts create thought forms. And this is then becomes, we start to feel like there's another person inside of us. But it's a thought form that we have created and imbued with our consciousness and our powerful emotions. And it can sometimes take on a life of its own, but nevertheless, we have created this thought form and imbued it with our consciousness. And it can feel like a second personality. So we might start hearing voices in our head. And every voice we hear is a thought that we've had, that we've gone unheard. Nobody wants to hear us. My needs are unmet. And every unmet need, given time, will turn into a sub-personality and take on a life of its own and overwhelm us. And we begin to believe that that is someone else overtaking us. But it's not. It's a thought form we have created with the use of our psychic energies. Remember, I said all of our thoughts and our emotions have psychic power, soul power, consciousness. But because we have put a dam on our unmet needs and kind of numbed them down, causing a huge separation between us and the subpersonality now, this voice in our head, or many voices some people have to one degree or another. We can feel pretty powerless up against this powerful thought form that we have created. Now, when we feel powerless, that is a dam that we have put on to those powerful feelings to what we think keep them in check. But you can't keep them in check for very long. So we'll find ourselves exploding with anger and rage because it's a build-up inside of us of this powerful, powerful energy that we are. And in the moment of the rage, the explosion of anger, we desperately seek physical release and relief in that moment. And it is in that moment that someone is hurt by what's happened. That someone can be us, or it can be someone physically close to us in that moment. If it's us, and the anger mixed in with the feelings of powerlessness and deep, deep pain and trauma, we want release from that. So in that moment, you might seek to self-harm because the release physically of the pain is easier than the emotional pain to bear. Or we might take drugs to just get ourselves out of it. By drinking too much, getting drunk, smoking cannabis, whatever it is. Some people will go to sex and have sex over and over again, hoping to find that release and relief in the moment. Other people are violent in the moment. And according to how intense all of this anger and rage, the build-up of the powerlessness, the anger, the frustration, all stemming from demanding, needy behaviour patterns, the root cause of which is unmet needs. So this is the cycle of addiction. Unmet needs, of reassurance. We need reassurance when we're tiny, when we're new to the earth. We need to be held. We need to feel that we are loved. Because from that, if we feel unloved, we'll have self-esteem issues, self-worth issues. We could go on to when we're at school being bullied. All of that is stemming from our unmet needs. We lose our centeredness. We're not grounded. We don't want to be here in the body because it's painful to feel these feelings in the body. So we don't become fully incarnate. That leads to needy behaviour, bedwetting, releasing the emotions during our sleep state, being ridiculed because of the bedwetting perhaps, shame around that, all one thing on top of another, building up over time. We lose our voice because we begin to feel invisible. We are not heard. We might develop a stammer because of it, because we're scared to voice our needs, because we're told as children to be quiet. No, be still, sit still. And you know yourselves, I know the feeling very well in the pit of my stomach of dread, of waiting for the next brick to fall, the next bomb to go off. And we walk about with these feelings these emotions locked in us, and they paralyze us in certain circumstances, and we shut down. We call it becoming numb. We come into early adulthood and there's nothing but confusion and frustration. We're living from our head, so we can't feel our purpose, we can't feel our passion, and we shut down our feelings even more. We get a little bit older. The strain of living from the mind, the thoughts, trying to keep on top of everything causes a build-up even more. Feelings of, I'm not coping, anxiety, depression. And all of this now needs to be owned rather than it owning us. Powerlessness. We've given our power to others, and we get angry because we've done that. But all of this is going on in the subconscious. We're not understanding what's happened to us, why it's happened, and how we can put it right. It's painful. It's traumatic. But there's a way out. All of this can be transformed. We created it with our thoughts and our emotions, and we can change it. Nothing is set in stone. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying it won't take effort. I'm not saying it's going to be quick, because there is no quick fix. But what I am going to tell you is that once you decide to own it and go through and feel every feeling that you've ever had without entertaining that feeling, i.e. not having a conversation with it, just letting it overwhelm you, let it be there, and it will pass. I can 100% guarantee to you that if you feel these feelings, allow them to keep coming up and coming up, and just feeling them without engaging with them, they will leave you. You will transmute everything, which is a feeling of, it's leaving me. Feeling of relief. Oh. And all of this is accomplished by getting out of your head, which causes the suffering. The unmet need happened once. But if we don't feel that unmet need and acknowledge it, we'll go over and over and over it in our emotions and our thoughts. And we call that suffering. So I'll see you in the next video, where we will go deeper into this. Much love to us all.